Imagine a sweltering evening in a quiet residential quarter on the edge of Tehran. The air is heavy with dust, and narrow lanes snake past crumbling warehouses and corroded iron gates. Among the few pedestrians, a woman draped in loose Muslim clothing stands out, her face veiled with a light scarf. Walking beside her is a man in traditional garb, giving the impression of a brother or husband escorting a female relative. Their steps are unhurried, their conversation brief and occasional. To anyone watching, they look like nothing more than an ordinary pair blending into the city's rhythm. Unremarkable, forgettable, but beneath this appearance lies a hidden reality. Each step the woman takes is part of a perilous mission. Her eyes, concealed behind the veil, dart toward walls, security cameras, and locked doors. She notices one warehouse in particular, conspicuously lacking permanent guards. That very warehouse is the one Iranian officials never dared to acknowledge, not even in whispers. Behind those plain walls lay something of immense consequence, something capable of altering the balance of power across the Middle East, the nerve center of a clandestine nuclear project. No one passing by could have imagined that this woman's stroll was the opening act of one of the boldest operations ever undertaken. A masterpiece of deception by Israel's Mossad that would enable them to steal Iran's most sensitive nuclear secrets right from under the noses of those who believed themselves invulnerable. And the method by which it was executed would later sound almost unreal. For Israel, the question of Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons was never just another political debate. It was a matter of survival. For years, Iranian leaders had proclaimed openly that Israel should be erased. They financed and armed groups sworn to Israel's destruction, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza. The thought of such an enemy one day holding a nuclear bomb was perceived in Israel not as a distant possibility, but as a catastrophe that had to be stopped by any means necessary. In 2015, world powers reached the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, with Iran. Under its terms, Iran pledged to restrict its nuclear activities in exchange for the lifting of suffocating international sanctions. To the West, this was hailed as a diplomatic triumph, but in Israel, no one celebrated. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Mossad Director Yossi Cohen declared the deal a grave mistake. Their reasoning was blunt. The agreement did not truly block Iran from developing nuclear capabilities in secret. Instead, it granted Tehran precious time to quietly prepare for the day restrictions would lapse when they could rush toward the bomb unimpeded. Then, in January 2017, the political landscape shifted. Donald Trump entered the White House with a team far more hardline toward Iran. For Israel, this was the opening they had been waiting for. If they could prove Iran was cheating, Trump might withdraw the United States from the deal. But mere accusations would not suffice. The world had grown weary of endless claims without evidence. What was required now was undeniable proof. That was when Mossad conceived its audacious plan. They would secure evidence so irrefutable that no leader or diplomat could dismiss it. Not grainy satellite photos, not whispered reports from agents, but physical documents produced by the Iranians themselves, complete with signatures, seals, blueprints, and technical plans. If such materials could be placed before the world's decision-makers, the narrative of Iran's peaceful nuclear program would collapse in an instant. Within Israeli intelligence circles, it was understood this would not be a routine operation. It was a gamble with stakes as high as history itself. If it succeeded, the nuclear deal could be shattered, and Iran would suffer a crushing political defeat. If it failed, the fallout could be catastrophic. But for Israel, there was no alternative. They were determined to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran. In espionage, intelligence is gathered primarily in two ways. The first is human intelligence, relying on agents and informants willing to risk their lives to smuggle out secrets. The second is SIGINT, signals intelligence, which intercepts calls, emails, and messages. Mossad deployed both. Hidden deep within the Iranian regime were individuals ready to collaborate. Some did it for financial gain, others out of ideological opposition, and some simply out of hatred for the system. These insiders began to whisper of suspicious activity. Iran's most secret nuclear files were being relocated. Simultaneously, Israeli specialists intercepted encrypted communications among senior Iranian officials. Slowly, Piece by piece, the puzzle came into focus. In February 2016, only months after the nuclear deal was signed, Iran covertly transferred its entire nuclear archive to an industrial district named Shohrabad, south of Tehran. Inside a seemingly ordinary warehouse were 32 massive safes, each packed with confidential material. Most remarkably, the facility lacked permanent guards. Among those orchestrating the move were Energy Minister Reza Ardakanian and the head of the nuclear program, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, a man Israel knew as the father of Iran's atomic project. Once Mossad identified the precise location of this archive, the most dangerous phase began: operational planning. This mission demanded absolute perfection. It required infiltrating the enemy's capital, breaching fortified safes, extracting thousands of documents, and vanishing without leaving a trace. The first step was reconnaissance. A female agent fluent in Farsi entered Tehran under deep cover. Disguised as a modest local woman escorted by a male relative, she walked slowly through the dusty streets of the Shohrabad zone. To all appearances, she was taking a simple evening stroll, but her real task was to observe the target warehouse, study its defenses, and assess whether it could be approached unnoticed. Back in Israel, preparations intensified. Using blueprints, photographs, and detailed intelligence, Mossad constructed an exact replica of the Shohrabad warehouse. From the gates to the safe placements, every feature was reproduced with painstaking accuracy, even wall thickness and door materials. Agents trained tirelessly inside this replica, rehearsing every move, perfecting their timing, and mastering their tools. Time was their greatest limitation. Intelligence revealed they could remain inside no longer than 7 hours, from the moment of entry until dawn, when guards returned and the district awakened. Any delay could spell disaster, capture, imprisonment, and an international scandal. Then came the boldest decision of all. Instead of merely photographing the archives, they would physically steal them. The idea seemed reckless. Tens of thousands of pages and digital files would have to be moved. But Mossad's logic was ironclad. Originals could not be dismissed as fabrications. They would be irrefutable evidence. Fewer than 24 operatives were selected for the mission, a mix of Israelis and Iranians working for Mossad. Each was entrusted with only a fragment of the plan. This was not a job for amateurs. Every individual was an experienced professional willing to risk their life to alter the course of the Middle East. The night over Tehran's Shohrabad industrial zone was cool and silent, a haze of smog lingering in the air. The warehouse appeared abandoned, but inside lay the prize Israel sought. At precisely 1 minute past midnight, the operation began. The small team approached the gates in silence. They had no more than 7 hours before the area came alive with morning activity. The alarm system was disabled in minutes. The agents knew exactly which wires to cut, exactly where the control boxes were hidden. Then they turned to the steel doors, thick, reinforced, designed to withstand intrusion. With powerful industrial cutters that burned at 3,600 degrees Celsius, the agents sliced through the metal as though it were wax, leaving jagged edges behind. Inside stood the rows of colossal safes, 32 in all, each crammed with folders, disks, and blueprints. Opening them all was impossible. That was never the plan. Mossad had already identified the 6 that contained the most critical intelligence, the details of Project Ahmad and its continuation. The work began at furious speed. Cutters screeched, locks gave way, and operatives rotated in shifts to haul out documents, classified papers, stacks of blueprints, CDs, and flash drives. By dawn, they had secured nearly 50,000 pages and 55,000 digital files stored across 183 CD-ROMs. Simultaneously, a special team transmitted scanned material directly to Tel Aviv via encrypted channels. This ensured that even if the physical trove was intercepted, the intelligence itself would not be lost. So far, everything had unfolded as planned. But the greatest danger still loomed, escaping Tehran with the treasure before anyone discovered the breach. At 7 a.m., as the pale winter sun crept over the city, a security guard in Shohrabad noticed the impossible. The gates of the warehouse were shattered, the locks destroyed, the doors twisted. Inside, chaos, open safes, scattered papers, empty shelves. For a stunned moment, silence hung in the air. Then panic erupted. Calls flooded local police, the Ministry of Intelligence, and the Revolutionary Guard. Within an hour, armed patrols filled the streets. Roadblocks sprang up. Vehicles were inspected one by one. The hunt for the stolen archive began in earnest, but the Mossad team was already gone. That very night, the truck carrying the documents raced toward the Azerbaijani border. Yet it was not alone. Several decoy trucks departed simultaneously, each on a different route, each designed to lure Iranian pursuers. The strategy worked. While Iranian intelligence scrambled to comprehend what had been taken, the most vital data was already secure in Israel. Back in Tehran, another team immediately began scanning and transmitting the archives, ensuring that even in the worst-case scenario, the operation's success could not be undone. By the time the real truck slipped across the border, Tehran was in full-blown crisis mode. No operatives were captured. No authentic truck intercepted. The deception had been flawless. Mossad had vanished as though it had never been there, leaving only open safes and shocked officials in its wake. By the morning of January 31, 2018, Tehran was convulsing with panic. What was meant to be a tightly guarded secret had become a humiliating disaster. Patrols swarmed the Shorabad district, checkpoints clogged the streets, and every vehicle was subjected to scrutiny. Helicopters with thermal imaging scanned neighborhoods, security footage was reviewed, and locals were interrogated. But there was nothing. No trail, no suspects. It was as if the thieves had dissolved into thin air. For Iranian intelligence, the failure was more than operational. It was a devastating blow to its prestige and reputation. And soon, whispers began circulating through the May. Later in 2024, former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad made a statement that left the nation stunned. At the very core of Iran's intelligence apparatus, inside the very branch responsible for safeguarding the country from Mossad infiltration, there was in fact a double agent. Even more astonishing, that traitor turned out to be the chief of the unit himself. Ahmadinejad went on to allege that nearly 20 Iranian operatives had secretly collaborated with Israel, assisting in the theft of the nuclear archive. These were not minor informants feeding scraps of information, but high-ranking individuals with direct access to the most sensitive state secrets. Official channels naturally denied such accusations, yet the undeniable reality remained. Iran never managed to reclaim the stolen archive. And the revelation that Mossad had managed to infiltrate the uppermost tier of its intelligence services was not only humiliating, but deeply dangerous. An unmistakable signal that someone at the very top had been serving the enemy all along. When Israeli experts began carefully sifting through the seized archive, they discovered material that even the most seasoned intelligence veterans recognized as a global-level bombshell. The majority of the documents dated between 1999 and 2003, years during which Iran had publicly declared that its nuclear program was entirely peaceful. But buried inside those files and disks lay a drastically different truth. There were elaborate blueprints for nuclear warheads, technical diagrams of explosive mechanisms, and the documented results of powerful detonation experiments. Some papers carried detailed calculations for fitting a nuclear charge into a warhead casing. Others displayed photographs and schematic layouts of the underground Fordo facility, specifically constructed to enrich uranium under conditions of complete secrecy. What stood out most were the files describing a deliberate two-tier strategy. One program openly presented to international inspectors as a civilian initiative, and a hidden parallel program devoted to military weapons development. This structure was engineered so Iran could maintain an appearance of transparency, all while secretly advancing its march toward nuclear arms capability. Perhaps the most alarming revelation was that these plans carried the names of Iran's highest leadership. Among them was future President Hassan Rouhani, the top commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the elite Quds Force. These findings did more than prove Iran had been pursuing nuclear weapons. They demonstrated that the entire program had the full support of the country's political and military elite, meaning the entire international community had been deceived for years. When the initial batch of data from the archive was reviewed in Israel, it was promptly shared with allied nations. Yet Mossad's testimony alone could not carry the necessary weight. Independent international verification was critical to prove that these files were not fabricated propaganda, but genuine evidence. The International Atomic Energy Agency was given access to the materials and launched its own analysis. Soon after, Western intelligence agencies, those of the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, joined in the verification process. Each country dispatched teams of experts, nuclear physicists, engineers, and intelligence analysts to conduct a rigorous review. The evaluation was exhaustive. They examined not only the technical content but also the physical attributes of the documents: paper aging, signatures, seals, archival numbering, and digital file metadata. Their conclusion was unanimous and unshakable. The archive was entirely authentic. It did not take long before leading international media outlets began covering the revelations. The New York Times conducted its own investigation and reached the same verdict. For decades, Iran had indeed maintained a covert military nuclear program, deliberately concealing it from inspectors. For Israel, this was nothing short of a diplomatic triumph. They now possessed not just accusations, but hard evidence confirmed by the most respected experts and acknowledged by world powers. This shifted the strategic landscape and made the next step, convincing the United States to withdraw from the nuclear deal, far more achievable. On April 30, 2018 in Jerusalem, an event unfolded that within hours echoed across the globe. Under the bright lights of television cameras, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stepped onto the stage. Behind him, a giant screen displayed photographs and diagrams, while before him stood rows of shelves filled with black binders and boxes packed with disks. This was the Iranian nuclear archive. Netanyahu addressed the world with conviction and intensity. He declared that these documents provided undeniable proof that Iran had lied for years, continuing its clandestine military nuclear program in secret. He showcased warhead designs, underground facility blueprints, and images of explosive tests. Every word of his speech was crafted for maximum impact, both for domestic audiences and for the international stage, and the effect was immediate. Just days later, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that America would withdraw from the JCPOA nuclear agreement. This was precisely the outcome Israel had been striving for since the beginning of the operation. Yet Israel did not stop at the public unveiling. The archive was also shared with the intelligence services of Germany, France, the United Kingdom, as well as Russia, India, Australia, and of course, the United States. Each nation was granted the chance to independently verify both the authenticity and the magnitude of the material. Thus, Mossad's Tehran operation became more than just an intelligence coup. It transformed into a formidable political instrument, one that reshaped global diplomacy and altered the balance of power across the Middle East. The theft of Iran's nuclear archive was far more than a successful mission. It redrew the strategic map of the region. First, it amplified Iran's international isolation. The exposed documents proved that Tehran had secretly pursued nuclear weapons while proclaiming peaceful intentions, providing even skeptical nations with grounds to support stricter oversight and harsher sanctions. Second, the daring operation served as a testament to Mossad's prowess. The agency had proven it could execute a highly complex mission deep inside enemy territory, penetrating security systems, extracting half a ton of documents, and escaping without a single casualty. For allies, it was proof of Israel's unparalleled intelligence capability. For enemies, it was a chilling warning. Third, the archive theft was part of a broader strategy designed to prepare for the possibility of military action should Iran near the nuclear threshold. Israel made it abundantly clear that it was ready to strike unilaterally if necessary, without waiting for international approval. Finally, the operation connected seamlessly to other covert campaigns. These included the 2020 sabotage at the Natanz facility, which crippled vital uranium enrichment infrastructure, and the November 2020 assassination of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the man Israel identified as the father of Iran's nuclear weapons program. All these threads wove together into a single picture. Israel was conducting a long-term, multi-layered campaign with one goal: preventing Iran from ever obtaining nuclear arms, regardless of the cost. For Israel, the archive heist was not only a breathtaking intelligence accomplishment, but also an act of existential defense, an operation planned with meticulous care and executed with surgical precision. In a region where adversaries openly call for Israel's destruction, such missions are not mere political maneuvers. They are acts of survival. This story underscores a harsh reality. In intelligence work, true victories often go unseen in the moment. They unfold in the shadows, without grand announcements, yet their impact can alter the balance of power, sway the decisions of global leaders, and shape the destiny of entire regions. That is why this operation will stand as a textbook example of how a single brilliantly conceived mission can rewrite geopolitical realities. It all began the day a woman in a hijab casually walked past an unremarkable warehouse on the outskirts of Tehran, marking the start of an operation that would forever change Middle Eastern politics. Now a question remains for you. Do you believe Mossad's strike truly stopped Iran's nuclear ambitions for the foreseeable future, or did it merely postpone the inevitable? Share your views in the comments. And if you found this story compelling, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.